everyone, my name is Max, the Technical Support Associate at Dubility, the makers of SurveyCTO. In our world, computer security is a major concern we constantly need to address. It seems like every day we hear about some breakdown in computer security. SurveyCTO has a long history of protecting your data, from encrypting your data in transit, including the option for end-to-end encryption, restricting access with teams and user role permissions, and so much more. SurveyCTO is even SOC2 Type 2 certified, one of the most rigorous and well-respected security certifications out there. But of course, because we care so much about protecting your data, we didn't just want to stop there. To further protect your data, we recently released a new version of SurveyCTO that includes new security settings, which focus on mobile collection devices and involve separating the data for different projects and enforcing device security settings right from the server. You can ensure your data is as secure as possible, so only authorized users have access, and data is impossible to read without the right credentials. In this webinar, we will discuss those new security features. At the end of this webinar, we will have a Q&A. So if you have questions on anything we have discussed, post it using the Q&A feature in Zoom, which you can find at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we'll get to it at the end. I will answer questions about security settings in SurveyCTO out loud, and my colleague, Marta, will answer other questions about SurveyCTO in the Q&A window. Feel free to post your questions to the Q&A as you think of them, and we will answer them at the end. If I'm speaking too quickly, you can use the Zoom chat to ask me to slow down. At the end, I will share with you a list of resources so you can learn more about the features we have discussed, as well as a feedback form so we can get your thoughts on this webinar. We are also recording this webinar. That recording without the Q&A will be posted to the SurveyCTO blog within the next few days, so you will be able to rewatch this at any time. This webinar is brought to you by the Safe People and Data Initiative, where we work to adapt data collection methods from in-person interviewing to methods that protect everyone involved, providing the safest environment possible. For example, new SurveyCTO features will make it a lot easier to enforce security settings remotely. We've had a few presenters in our webinar series who've come to speak to us about how they're adapting their data collection. If you're able to contribute to the initiative in some way through offering resources for others, or if there's something you're interested in presenting, feel free to let us know. To learn more about the initiative, take a look at the website or get in touch with us by the email address on screen. We will start by briefly discussing what SurveyCTO is and how it can be beneficial to your project. We will then discuss the new WORKSPACES feature in SurveyCTO Collect, where you can organize and separate forms and data for different projects. Finally, we'll talk about new mobile security settings, where you can enforce collection device settings from your server console, including requiring lock screens, private storage, and more, and how you can use those settings to optimize data security. First, if you're not familiar, let's briefly discuss why you should use SurveyCTO. SurveyCTO has powerful form design features that lend themselves to flexible and scalable deployment in any data collection setting. The result is robust form designs facilitated partly through features for testing form designs to help you with quality control. Quality and trust are design principles of SurveyCTO with sophisticated quality control functionality, enabling review and correction of data and automated statistical quality checks. There are also real-time data monitoring and visualization tools built in while facilitating data publishing to help you take advantage of the features of outside systems. Data protection is a key design principle, and SurveyCTO has multiple layers of security built in, including optional private public key encryption, single sign-on, and restricted access through the use of custom user roles through permissions within teams. SurveyCTO also offers GDPR-compliant hosting. This webinar will also discuss some of the new security features that have been added, which you can implement into your data workflows. The platform is also supported by a team of experts, such as myself, who are constantly improving a growing body of learning materials aimed at helping you succeed, including a self-paced training course. Data collection is done using either the SurveyCTO Collect app or using web forms. The SurveyCTO Collect app works offline, so you can collect data in an area that has no internet. Then later, when back online, the enumerator can submit the data they have collected to the server. Within Forms, you can also customize fields with field plugins, changing their appearance and behavior to fit your needs. SurveyCTO Collect also has various settings you can customize to make sure enumerators only have access to the features they need and ensure your data is kept safe and secure. This webinar will focus on the organizational and security settings you can set up, but be sure to check out our resources to learn more about the other settings you can use. Let's talk about one of the most exciting new features of SurveyCTO Collect Workspaces. Before, if you want to use the same collection device for multiple projects, there would end up being multiple unrelated forms in the same workspace. This could lead to all sorts of issues and frustrations, such as trying to remember which forms are for the current project, accidentally submitting data to the wrong server, having to log out to access different case management menus, and so on. With the new Workspaces feature, you can have multiple work projects in the same SurveyCTO Collect app on the same device and keep their forms and settings separate. Let's take a look at an example. This is an emulator of an Android device. With SurveyCTO Collect open, here we have all 5 main menu options: fill blank form, edit saved form, send finalized form, get blank form, and delete saved form. If I tap in the 3-line menu, also called the hamburger menu, in the upper left, the Workspaces menu opens. I can see 2 different logins on this device, one called Farm Survey that is logged into the server Success, and one called Household Survey that is logged into the server Presentation. Each of these different logins is called a workspace. If I tap the second workspace, Household Survey, that workspace loads instead. As you can see, in addition to being connected to a different server, this workspace also has very different settings. The Manage Cases menu is turned on so the enumerator can access that menu, but the Fill Blank Form, Get Blank Form, and Delete Saved Form menu options are all turned off. So this enumerator can only fill out forms from cases since the Manage Cases menu is turned on, but not the Fill Blank Form menu. Also, while these 2 workspaces happen to be for different servers, Success and Presentation, you can also have workspaces that are for the same server on the same device, and they will not interfere with each other. In short, with different workspaces, you can have multiple accounts for the same collection device. Those accounts can be for different enumerators, the same enumerator, but for different projects, or whatever else you need. Each workspace will be completely separate. Workspaces will not share blank forms, completed forms, or even settings. Each workspace will have its own forms and its own settings, and the workspaces will not interfere with each other. Creating a workspace is really easy. Tap the hamburger menu in the upper left and tap Add New Workspace. We are now in the Run Quick Setup menu where the enumerator will enter their credentials and then receive settings from the server. Give the workspace a name. I'll name this workspace after the hypothetical project, so I'll call this Economic Survey. Then enter the user credentials. Here, I'll log into the server Presentation as the user enumerator 2. Tap Run Quick Setup, which will have the device receive the required forms and settings from the server, and we're all set. I'll tap OK at this pop-up. And if you look at the top, we are now in the workspace called Economic Survey. If I tap the hamburger menu in the upper left, I can see all 3 workspaces and I can easily switch between them. That way, if I am an enumerator hired by 2 different clients for 3 different projects, I can easily switch between them without mixing up any of the data. As mentioned before, each workspace will have its own settings. One of these settings is to make the workspace a dedicated workspace. This means the server of the workspace cannot be changed. For example, in the screenshot, the user is signing into the presentation server. Because dedicated workspace is turned on, they cannot return to the settings later and change the server of this workspace. If the user wanted to sign into a different server, they would have to sign into a whole new workspace. This is turned on by default, but if you feel it will be necessary for enumerators to change the server for a workspace at any point in the future, you can turn this off. You can also enforce this setting from the server console, so enumerators have to use dedicated workspace, which we will discuss later. Each workspace will have its own general settings and admin settings. So, for example, if you turn on the Manage Cases menu for one workspace, it will not turn it on for any other workspace on the device. You will need to turn it on for each workspace individually. To make sure all needed settings are applied automatically, we recommend setting up a default device configuration where as soon as the user logs in using their credentials, their needed settings are automatically applied. At the end of this webinar, we will share resources you can use to learn how to set that up. You can also assign a passcode to each workspace from the admin settings. That way, if multiple enumerators are using the same device, they cannot access each other's forms or data. Let's set up a passcode for a new workspace. Here is the economic survey workspace we created before. I'll tap the three-dot menu in the upper right and tap Admin Settings. From here, I'll tap Workspace Passcode, enter my new passcode, re-enter it here, and tap OK. And we're all set. Now, a user needs a passcode to access this workspace. Let's give it a try. I'll go to the Workspace menu, and I'll switch to the Household Survey workspace. Then, I'll switch back to the Economic Survey workspace. Since this workspace is now passcode protected, we need to enter the passcode to access it. Of course, I use the passcode 0000 as an example, but make sure your own passcodes are a lot more secure. Workspaces can be a great way for enumerators to share devices without needing to log in and out. Just create 2 or more workspaces on the device, and enumerators can sign into their own workspace whenever they need to. You can set up passcodes so enumerators can only access their own workspace. This is also great for archiving old data on the device. If a new enumerator is using a device for a new data collection project, instead of deleting the old forms and data, you can secure the old space with a passcode and create a new workspace for the new enumerator. That way, you can hide the old forms from the new user. Another great use of workspaces is for working on multiple projects on the same device, even if those projects are for different clients. An organization can be hired by 2 different clients, even if the organization only has 1 collection device per enumerator, and they can create a workspace for each client. That way, the client's forms and data are kept separate, and the enumerator can easily switch between them as needed. For example, in this screenshot, I'm signed into 2 different servers over 3 different workspaces. In this scenario, the enumerator was hired by the owner of the Success server to work on the Farm Survey project, and they were also hired by the owner of the Presentation server to work on the Household Survey project, as well as the Economic Survey project. Even though there are forms for multiple clients on this device, all of their data is kept separate. This can make data collection more efficient since it's easier to outsource data collection to other organizations and also less expensive since you don't have to provide a different collection device for each project since the enumerator will only need 1 device for all projects. In addition to the introduction of workspaces to SurveyCTO Collect, SurveyCTO now has new mobile security settings that can be managed from the server. With the new security settings, instead of needing to manually check each physical device to make sure it has the correct settings, you can enforce those settings right from the server, which is not only easier, but safer. There are now settings that allow you to enforce collection device settings right from your server console. These settings can be managed from the Collect tab of your server console. To access these new settings, log into your server console, go to the Collect tab, and under Mobile Data Collection, click Settings, and the mobile settings will appear. These settings involve enforcing certain security settings on collection devices before the enumerator can download forms and submit data to the server. You can also exempt certain user roles from these settings so certain user roles can collect data without them. Let's discuss the available mobile data collection settings. Not all of them are new, but all of them can help keep your data as secure as possible. Your enumerators may already have most of them set up, but it's a good idea to require them just to be safe. To access the settings, go to the server console and go to the Collect tab. And under Mobile Data Collection, click Settings. The top 3 settings are a bit older, but since they are related to security, we'll go over them anyway. At the top, we have Notify Collect Users of Updates. Exactly what it sounds like. When this setting is turned on, Users logged into your server will get a notification when there is a new version of SurveyCTO Collect available from the Play Store for Android or the App Store for iOS. New versions of Collect will not only include new features, but bug fixes and security patches. Next is Require Lock Screen. If this setting is turned on, then the Android or iOS collection device must have a lock screen to use SurveyCTO Collect. Even if you secure your workspaces with passcodes, it is a good idea to also secure the device with a passcode and encryption, which we will discuss soon. So if it is stolen, thieves will not be able to access the data on the device. Next is Require Private Workspace Storage. In SurveyCTO Collect, there are two types of storage: private app storage and public app storage. With public app storage, form data is stored using the Android file system, so a user could go into the Android File Explorer app to view and modify the collected data, or another app on the device could view or make changes to that data. With private app storage, data is not viewable from the Android file system, so it is more secure. This can be changed in the SurveyCTO Collect admin settings. However, if you make private app storage required from the mobile data collection settings, then SurveyCTO Collect can only be used on that server if private app storage is turned on. This only applies to Android, since on iOS, you can only use private app storage. Now let's get into the new features. With required device encryption, SurveyCTO Collect cannot work with that server unless device encryption is set up. If device encryption is set up, then data will be encrypted whenever the collection device is locked. That way, if it is stolen, the thief will not be able to read any of the data on the device. Since the device will not be encrypted until it is locked, we recommend turning this on with the Require Lock Screen setting, so the device cannot be decrypted without the passcode. It is possible to get around security settings on a device and install software that was not intended, either jailbreaking or rooting a device. While this can allow you to further customize a device, it can cause major security issues, exposing that device manufacturers usually protect against. With Don't Allow Jailbroken or Rooted Devices, you can ensure only devices that have not been jailbroken or rooted can be used with your server, further securing your data. Finally, you can require dedicated workspaces. As mentioned before, if a workspace is dedicated, then the enumerator cannot sign into one server, then go into the settings and sign into a different server. If they want to sign into a different server, they will have to create a new workspace instead. This prevents enumerators from mixing up forms from different servers. If required dedicated workspaces is turned on, there are two additional settings available. If Don't Allow Any Outside Access is turned on, then SurveyCTO Collect will be isolated from just about everything besides your SurveyCTO server. For example, you have to use private app storage, you can't use third-party apps with SurveyCTO, and more. Check out our documentation to learn more about the restrictions in detail. The Don't Allow Undedicated setting is straightforward. If the setting is turned on, then the enumerator cannot turn off the dedicated workspace setting from the general settings. If your server requires dedicated workspaces, we strongly recommend turning this setting on. Generally speaking, all of these settings can be great ways to secure and protect your collection devices. It is important to keep SurveyCTO Collect up to date, keep it secure with a lock screen and encryption, and ensure security settings have not been bypassed. However, consider the needs of your project and whether the devices connected to your server need these settings or not. Later, we will discuss how to exempt certain users from these settings. As discussed earlier, you can secure a workspace using a passcode. There are times where enumerators may forget their passcode and cannot access their workspace. When this happens, go to the same mobile data collection settings from before and click the Temporarily Allow App Passcode Reset button. Once that is active, all workspaces connected to that server will be accessible without a passcode, and the user can log in and reset their passcode. Once the passcode is reset, click Cancel so passcodes are required again, but it will also turn off on its own after 10 minutes. You can also customize server access and permission using user roles. Each user role will have its own permissions, which you can customize. Then, when you assign a user role to a user, that user will have their permissions defined in that user role. For example, you can set up a user role so its users can only see forms and submit data, so they can only view data but not edit it, so they can manage users and so much more. You can also set up teams so that certain user roles can only access certain forms. We also have new security settings where you can restrict access to external APIs. SurveyCTO can be used with external APIs, such as the REST API. However, this can pose a security risk if a user uses an API or a script that uses an API that is not completely trustworthy. If you turn off this setting, then SurveyCTO will only be able to interact with authorized applications such as SurveyCTO Collect and SurveyCTO Desktop. We have also added a setting to ignore mobile security settings for users in this user role. Earlier, we discussed a series of security settings you require on collection devices, such as requiring lock screens and encryption. If this setting is turned on, then users with that user role will not have to follow those security settings. For example, if a user is using an older Android device that does not support device encryption, you can assign them a user role with the Ignore Mobile Security Settings setting turned on. That way, they can collect data even though their device cannot be encrypted. If you were to start requiring new security settings for all users at once, you might have dozens or even hundreds of enumerators calling and complaining that they can't use SurveyCTO Collect. For example, if an enumerator never set up device encryption, but device encryption is now required, then SurveyCTO Collect will stop working properly, and the enumerator might not even know why. Instead of applying the settings for all users at once, you can start by turning on the Ignore Mobile Security Settings setting for all user roles, then slowly turning it off for one user role at a time. That way, instead of needing to help everyone at once, you can work with smaller groups of enumerators to help them update their collection device with the needed settings. With these new security settings, even if there is no specific public key assigned to a form, you can ensure data is always encrypted while the device is locked. Even preloaded data sets and forms without a public key will be automatically encrypted, protecting your data from thieves. On your server, require collection devices to have a lock screen, use private app storage, and be encrypted. That way, even if the collection device is stolen, the data cannot be read without the device passcode. Even forms that do not use SurveyCTO encryption feature will be encrypted by the device and impossible to read while the device is locked. In addition to encryption on the device, all data stored on the server is encrypted, including forms, form data, and server datasets. When you download data over the internet, whether using Collect, Desktop, or another method, protocols are used to encrypt data in transit so it cannot be read by anyone except by an authorized user making the request for the data. With all of this combined, data is always encrypted and can only be read by authorized users. To summarize, if you require lock screens, private app storage, and device encryption, you can make sure all data, including server dataset data, is always encrypted until it is needed, keeping your data safe. With all these new security settings, you might be asking yourself, is it still worth setting up form encryption? Should you still assign a public key to your form? This all depends on your workflow and server setup. All of the security settings I've mentioned ensure that no one without the proper credentials can access your data. However, this does mean if someone were to retrieve the device passcode, they could retrieve all data stored on your device. Even if your server requires a device passcode, if your enumerators are not as security conscious, they could set up a passcode like 12340000 or something else unsecure. If a thief were to figure out the device passcode, they could go into the device, open SurveyCTO Collect, and look at the data. However, if form encryption has been set up, the data will still be unreadable, thwarting the attack. Form encryption also protects the data on your server. Many people use the same password for everything. This means if one of their passwords has been compromised, all accounts that use that password have been compromised. In my personal years of computer service, I've seen some truly awful passwords, even for people who work with highly sensitive data. By using form encryption, we ensure that if one of these passwords is leaked or deciphered, the data still cannot be read without the private key. Overall, use your best judgment when deciding which security features to use, whether you use form encryption, device encryption, or anything else to protect your data. Use the security settings that work well for your project and make sure your team knows the importance of securing the data they collect, and be sure to follow local laws regarding data protection. Lastly, before we move on to the Q&A, I would like to tell you about the next event in our webinar series, which will be on integrations with SurveyCTO. The data you collect with SurveyCTO can be analyzed, visualized, and processed with all sorts of third-party tools, including Stata, computer scripts, Google Sheets, and so much more. In the next webinar, we'll talk about automated integrations, specifically with Zapier, and how it can be helpful for some common use cases. We'll talk about how you can integrate SurveyCTO with these tools, including how they work, how they can be helpful, and how to set them up. You can take a look at our blog now, where you can register for the next webinar. SurveyCTO is also hiring on our customer success team. Customer success team members, such as myself, support users as they use SurveyCTO and design forms, develop content for users, such as support articles, sample forms, and field plugins, and provide feedback on possible improvements to SurveyCTO. We also offer excellent benefits. If you or anyone you know might be interested, go to surveycto.com/jobs to learn more.